This is going to be a simple video displaying an HDR photo and how high dynamic range affects a photo and just the image composition, what it looks like after HDR has been applied. So I have a dinner party photo with 3 different exposures. So these are bracketed exposures, and if you're new to HDR and bracketing, whenever you shoot a photo, you typically have one that's exposed correctly for the scene, or as correctly as your camera is able to do. And this is kind of a difficult scene here where you've got a lot more light within the middle of the scene and very little light outside of it. And what will happen is in a bracketed photo, we'll expose for this area here and or the middle of the photo, and then the next shot will be underexposed, and then the following shot will be overexposed. So here we actually see some of the stars in the sky that weren't visible before, and we actually see this pine tree is quite a bit more visible along with the grass and everything else around. So in order to get an image with greater dynamic range, we can combine those 3 photos so that it'll accept in these brightest points, it'll use the exposure from the darkest image. The correctly exposed image will kind of fill in some of the area that looks correctly exposed, and then the brighter areas, if they are overexposed, then yeah, it'll use the darker. In the darker areas, if they are underexposed, it's going to use this brighter photo. So it can pick up this grass here where we can't see the grass in the underexposed image. Okay, so let's see what happens here. I'm going to select these 3 photos in Photoshop, and this is just a little tip that'll help many of you speed up your processing. You can hit Shift Control H, and you'll notice that it launches off your HDR in the background for this photo, so that you don't have to go to the dialog every time. So we're going to wait a few seconds here. It's going to take this image, and it's a large image. This is shot on a Canon 5D Mark IV. So it's a pretty large image, and it's going to process this. And in LightRoom, it's going to re-import that HDR image. And you'll notice we have a drastically different image here, and it's still coming in. There's the sharpest point there. So now we have a whole lot more to work with this image, and it makes it a whole lot more interesting. If you process it, or if you have the camera process image, you get a similar image. It's a little bit different here. Actually, that's already processed. Let me see if I have. I don't have the JPEG that the 5D produces. I usually throw those away whenever I get back, just because I shoot in RAW, and you want to shoot in RAW when you're doing HDR for the greatest flexibility. But with the JPEG, you just don't have the same flexibility to come in here and edit it further. This is an image that I've kind of brought the intensity down just a little bit as far as the exposure within here, and I also straightened it or aligned it just a little bit more to give a little better effect. So HDR images are great at capturing kind of the ambiance or the mood of a situation that is very light. In order to shoot these shots, don't crank your ISO really high to, it depends on your camera what is considered high, but I leave mine at 400, 200 sometimes, and just shoot a really long exposure. You're going to obviously have to be mounted to a tripod to be able to do this, and if it's really dark, you will see some movement to the stars, and you can kind of see some of these stars have a little bit of streak to them because they're is just a little bit of motion going on, especially on the edge of the frames. But overall, it's a really clean shot. You can see that the detail is there. There's a little bit of grain in some areas, but not bad, and that can be easily reduced. I don't have any noise reduction happening right now, so a lot of that can be cleaned up through just applying a little bit of noise reduction. But anyway, that's a good introduction to HDR photography.